Starwalker Studios presents the Obsidian Monolith, creating an original campaign for Numenera.
Greetings, Numenerian, and welcome to the third episode of the Obsidian Monolith. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. Today, I talk about how I decided where to begin the campaign. So grab a pen, grab some paper, and get your creative juices going. It's time to create an adventure. I alluded to in the last episode of the Obsidian Monolith, the second one, that this time I would be talking about location, and it may seem odd to you that I would spend a whole episode on location, or that may seem pretty natural to you, depending how you look at it. Most people would view stories as made up of three elements: character, setting, and plot. So I guess it's not unreasonable to devote an episode to one of those elements. But this became a huge can of worms for me, and I think more so than any other campaign I've ever run, I really wrestled with the location. Where in the Ninth World was I going to have this take place? As you guys probably remember, I talked about last episode that one of the first ideas I had for the campaign was this idea of having a monolith or monoliths similar and perhaps in some way related or connected to the Amber Monolith. Now, as you may or may not know, the Amber Monolith is in Navarine, and I talked about on the previous episode that I was looking at the map of Navarine and saw that in that area there are four symbols for the floating relics that are the same symbol that they used for the Amber Monolith in that area. There are three in Navarine, and there's one close by in the Cloud Crystal Skyfields. So I thought, well, it kind of makes sense that maybe these things would be close together, and I've got these relics here that are the browned out symbols that Monte Cook Games is not going to do anything with, so they're safe for me to play with. So of course the original thought, or the easiest thought, was, well, I should have it take place in Navarine because that's where the relics are, and that's where the Amber Monolith is, and that's where the obelisk of the water god is. However, there's a few reasons that I wasn't a huge fan of that initial idea, and I was kind of resisting it and wanting to find a different idea. First of all, I like the idea of having the campaign take place somewhere less quote-unquote civilized than the Steadfast. When you read the geography sections in the core book, things kind of tend to get cooler the farther away from the Steadfast you go. And I like the Beyond. I like Beyond. I like how things or communities in the Beyond and Beyond are even more removed from one another as they are in the Steadfast. I like that, especially in the Beyond, because we're not given a lot of information about Beyond the Beyond, but at least in the Beyond, each little community or city or aldea or whatever is kind of like its own world. They're all unrelated to one another and very far apart. So I like that because I don't have to worry so much about the Steadfast, which seems to be kind of the Monte Cook Games playground. They seem to have put a lot more development into the Steadfast, and now with the World Guide, I guess they're going to put more crap in the Steadfast for us. I won't get on that rant, but so I kind of wanted to stay away from the Steadfast because it seems much more likely of something that Monte Cook Games does conflicting with something that I'm doing sometime in the unknowable future. And the Beyond, it's more removed. Like say for instance the Order of Truth. In an Aldea, you have maybe a clave of Eon priests, but they're not necessarily communicating with the Amber Pope or the Order of Truth within the Steadfast. And they may do things completely differently. So if I come up with some place in the beyond and I have a clave of Eon priests and I say this is how they do things, and then the world guy comes out and Monte Cook Games says this is how the Order of Truth does things, and they're totally different, it doesn't matter, because I can say, well, these priests out in this place in the beyond, they do things differently because they're unconnected with the Order in the Steadfast. So that's one reason. I also like the remoteness of the beyond locations, because you can do even more, I feel like, to make each one unique and make it so when the PCs go from one Aldea to another, it's almost like going from one world to another. You can make them so vastly different. Where the Steadfast, each kingdom of the Steadfast kind of has a culture, and the Steadfast as a whole kind of has a culture, and they all speak the truth and yada yada yada. So I really like the exploration part of Numenera and the Ninth World, and I really like where every place you go is completely different, and they're doing some bizarre things that you've never seen or heard of or thought of before, and I really like that. So those were a few reasons that I was kind of wanting to do it in the Beyond. And I also just like the idea of the frontier, right? I mean, in a way, the Beyond is kind of the frontier of the Ninth World, at least as we know of it from the core book, because we know quite a bit about the Steadfast. We know quite a bit about a few places in the Beyond, and then we know quite a bit about like one or two places beyond the Beyond, and that's it. So once you're in the Beyond, you're kind of getting to the margins of the known map of what we know and what the people of the Ninth World, or at least the Steadfast, know. And I like having a story on the edge of that and kind of pushing into the unknown and coming up with my own stuff for what's out there. Also, in addition to being resistant to putting the campaign, or at least the beginning of the campaign, in the Steadfast, I was also not a huge fan of having it in Navarine. I have to say that of all the kingdoms of the Steadfast, Navarine is probably about my least favorite. I don't know. There's just nothing about Navarine that makes me excited or think it's awesome. Although I am a huge fan of the city of Charmand, and I am a huge fan of Queen Armalou. But again, I really like those places. I really like Charmand and I really like Queen Armalou, but they're actually quite a ways away from where the monoliths are. So there you go. So I was talking about how one of the reasons I was wanting to avoid the Steadfast is I was wanting to avoid any possible conflicts with future supplements for Monte Cook Games. And just to come back to that a little bit, for an example, I've already done some development in Charmand, because when I first started coming up with ideas for this campaign, I had the idea of starting the campaign with one of the published adventures. And honestly now, I don't know why I was thinking of doing that, but I just had this idea of, hey, I'll take one of the published adventures and I'll start out with that and I'll segue into my campaign from that. So I got a group of people together to playtest this thing. I'd already come up with, ideas for my first adventure, or at the time what I thought was going to be the first adventure, which is now going to end up being like, I think the third or fourth adventure. But I got some people together and I started asking around, which of the published published adventures have you played? Which ones haven't you or read or anything? And so I decided to start with the Hidden Price. And I was actually originally going to do the Hidden Price, and then I was going to go into Three Sanctums. So I was going to do 2 published adventures before I got into my original stuff, which again, I don't know why at the time I thought that was a good idea. But I wanted to do Three Sanctums because Three Sanctums introduces the Convergence, which, if you don't know about the Convergence, they're basically a group in some ways similar to the Order of Truth in that they are seeking to understand the Numenera, but they are many times opposed to the Order of Truth. They work for different, I don't know, I was about to say they have different motives, but I'm not even convinced that they actually do have different motives due to my conversation about the Order of Truth before. But they're in competition with the Order of Truth. Let's say it that way. So the Three Sanctums adventure brings in the convergence and kind of establishes them as adversaries to the PCs. And I thought that would be kind of cool in a campaign that I'm thinking will involve the Order of Truth quite a bit, and maybe even involve the PCs either working for the Order of Truth or actually being members of the Order of Truth. So the Three Sanctums adventure takes place, or at least starts, from Charmand. I realize that you can take any adventure and put it anywhere, but I kind of read through Charmand and I was digging it, and so I thought, okay, yeah, I want to run this in Charmand, and then I don't have to change anything. And the hidden price actually takes place in Moulin, which is in Escobal, very close to Key. And I really liked that adventure, and I really liked it being in Moulin for various reasons. But I had a hell of a time coming up with ways to get the PCs from Moulin to Charmand, and finally I was like, why am I going to all this work trying to come up with segue adventures to go from Moulin to Charmand? I'll just have the hidden price take place near Charmand. So that's what I did, and I ran the hidden price, and the hidden price just went off the rails pretty quickly. I think I've talked about it on the show, and I don't really want to go into details on it because I don't want to spoil the hidden price in this episode right now. The PCs ended up doing some things that weren't totally unexpected by me, but were unexpected by the writer of the adventure, I guess, and kind of derailed the adventure about halfway through, and that was the end of that adventure. The results of that adventure had me thinking, I really need to know about Charmand, like specifically, what is the law like in Charmand? And I go to the book and none of that information is there. So I proceeded to come up with that information for my campaign because I needed to know how the authorities would respond to what the PCs had done. As I'm doing this, I just started thinking, I'd be willing to bet money that when the World Guide comes out, there's going to be some more information about Charmand, because some people want more about the Steadfast. And if I were Monty Cook Games and I was going to put out more about the Steadfast, I would probably put out some more about Charmand, because Charmand is a really cool place. There's the university there, and it seems like a great place to have as a hub for adventurers for various reasons. So if indeed there is going to be more information about the Steadfast in the World Guide, I think it's very likely that we'll learn more about Charmand. And again, if I were going to talk more about Charmand, I might start talking about law and order in Charmand and how that works. So then I was like, well, I'm going to put this thing out for my PCs and we're going to use it and everything will be great. But what if the World Guide comes out and it conflicts with that? And well, obviously I'll deal with that when it comes to it. But it was further reinforcing to me that, I'd really like to stay out of these areas and go into more unexplored territory. And another part of this was that I really wanted to develop some of my own places for a few reasons. First of all, I really enjoy developing my own places, and I've gotten requests and suggestions from more than one listener of GM Intrusions that I pull in my anthropology background and talk more about what different places in the Ninth World could be like, and what different societies could be like, and different customs and things like that. And I was like, that's such a great idea, because you look at a lot of fantasy games and even Numenera, and it seems like a lot of the places are drawing from a handful of very well-known cultures, and you don't really see things based on more obscure cultures that maybe only an anthropologist or someone who reads such things would even know about. And I thought, well, how cool would it be to do that, to take my experience as an anthropologist and the things I've learned and apply them to creating interesting places that are a little bit different than anything you've experienced before, which works really well with the Ninth World. So that was another reason to kind of try to do my own thing and create my own places. And now that I'm doing an actual supplement, obviously it would be good for that too, to say, in addition to an adventure, I'm going to give you some new towns that you can use, and new peoples with new customs and things like that you can either use it in the way that I've used it and put it where I put it on the map, or you can put it wherever you want. Because again, places in the ninth world are separated and tend to not communicate with one another. So even though I put, my city at this place in the beyond, there's no reason you couldn't put it somewhere in the steadfast or wherever you wanted. But unfortunately, I kept coming back to the Amber Monolith and the fact that Navarine is where the Amber Monolith is. The Steadfast is where the Order of Truth is. I do like this idea of having these other monoliths and having them connected. And yes, I could put them all over the world, and that's still an idea I'm playing with. It really depends how many of them I finally decide there are. Although I'm telling you right now, I probably won't ever say this is how many there are in the spirit of the ninth world, because, well, honestly, no one knows how many there are, and there's nothing to say that one won't be discovered somewhere someday that nobody knows about right now. And that leaves you, individual GM, with more things that you can play with. So at this point, I was kind of torn. So I decided to once again turn back to the core book and look for inspiration. So I read through all of the geography sections again, and I had a piece of paper, and I just tried to forget everything I was just talking about and just was looking for cool places to set my story. And so for you coming up with your own campaign, that's probably where you want to start. Go through the geography sections, just read through them, and every time you read something cool that you really like, write it down, say, I really like this place for this reason, find more on page whatever, and just make that list. And then once you've done that, then go back through your list, read those things over, and see if there's one that you particularly like more than the others, or maybe there's one that you start getting ideas of things that you could do there, or adventure ideas, or maybe if you already know what your player characters are, ideas for how you could do cool things with those characters in that place. And when that starts happening, you've got a good place to start. So that's what I did, and I was kind of shopping around for locations, and I didn't really find anything in the beyond or beyond the beyond that seemed to work super well with what I had in mind. Now, I thought about creating a completely new area in the beyond off the map that's in the core book, and just starting from scratch and coming up with my whole place. But first of all, that's a lot of work, and that's more time it takes before I can run the game, or more time it takes before I can do this podcast. And also, we have the World Guide on the horizon, and I am sure that when the World Guide comes out, there's going to be plenty of unclaimed real estate to do things like that. But it's not that long until it comes out, so I'd rather just wait and see what's left over and then create my new place there, as opposed to creating a place now and, again, having it conflict. So for you running your own game, this may or may not be as much of an issue. But honestly, wouldn't you rather have the option to use the great, awesome things that Monty Cook Games comes up with and still use your stuff, as opposed to saying, oh, well, Monty Cook Games came up with this really cool thing, but I can't use it because I already put something there, or I have to move it, or I have to retcon something. I mean, personally, I would just rather avoid all that. But again, I'm coming from a very specific point of view as someone who ran D&D back in the day in the Forgotten Realms and had to constantly deal with things coming out and invalidating stuff I did, and had to have this long laundry list of these things in the canon I'm using and these things in the canon I'm not. And so that definitely colors my experience and my outlook. And so if you haven't had that experience, it may not be as big a deal to you, or you may not think it's a big deal, but then realize that it is once you have to deal with it. I don't know. Another consideration for me personally is I want this to be compatible with as much of the Monty Cook Games products as I can in the future, because for one thing, I don't know when you're listening to this. You could be listening to this in the future, and I would like it to still be helpful for you. And for another thing, now I'm putting out a book about it, and the book will be a lot better if it doesn't conflict with all the other Numenera books you have, so that you can use everything, because that's what I would want as a GM. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So at this point, after weighing all this and going through the core book, I had to admit that I just wasn't finding something in the Beyond or the Beyond to Beyond that just really grabbed me and seemed to fit well with the concept I already had. Now, again, when you're creating your own campaign, you may go through this process differently. Notice that the first thing I did was brainstorm and generate ideas as far as kind of an arc to my campaign, or an idea of what it would be about or what it would involve. And then I tried to find places to fit that. You might want to go about it a little differently. Maybe when you read the core book, you found an area of the Ninth World that you just really, really loved. And if that's true, then, start with that place and then go from there and generate your list of ideas and pick ideas that fit well in that location. So you can definitely do this in different orders. This is just the way that I did it for this particular campaign. So once I resigned myself to using the Steadfast, I thought, well, I might as well look through the Steadfast some more and look through the different countries and take a good look at Navarine. I've already got these monoliths, or what could be monoliths, there. They're already on the map for me. The Amber Monolith is there. The Obelisk of the Water God is there. So Lex, just get over it. Let's take a look at Navarine with fresh eyes and see what we see. And very quickly, when I went through Navarine again, I found some things I really like about Navarine. I already mentioned Charmand and Queen Armalou, which I really like. I also found that I really like the Westwood. I love this idea of this huge forest that is for the most part unexplored by the people of Navarine. They have ventured into the edges a bit, they do some logging, but they don't go very deep into the forest, and it's this huge unknown thing, which is awesome. There's lots of room for exploration and discovery there. I also really like the Kalovas who live in the Westwood, and if you don't know, the Kalovas are an arachnoid type species of creatures that live in the Westwood. They are intelligent, at least as intelligent as humans. They have their own language, they have their own culture. Really interesting stuff. I really like what's going on in that area. There's some conflict going on in the area of the Westwood involving the Kalovas and other things. All right, so just so that we're on the same page, here's a little bit about Navarine from the core book. Navarine is one of the largest and most prosperous kingdoms in the Steadfast. Disliked by all the other lands, the people of Navarine are thought of as aloof, difficult, and even arrogant. Wealthy as a Navarine merchant is a saying in the Steadfast that almost always has implied negative connotations. So that right there does not greatly predispose me to like Navarine, but it is what it is. The southern part of the kingdom is known for its rich farmland. Simple farmers and herders work for wealthy landowners who in turn pay fealty to a small number of aristocratic families, each of whom answers to the queen, who rules from her capital of Charmand. Now, that's kind of interesting. So you've got these farmers and herders who are kind of like peasants or serfs who are working for these wealthy landowners who in turn answer to a very small number of powerful families who answer directly to the queen. So right there, we have a lot of potential conflict, of some intrigue. We've got layers of influence and power. And so this is getting interesting. Oh goody, now we get to talk about Charmand, which I really like, and the queen. Her palace is known as the Empeternal House, and at its center is a set of sealed chambers that Queen Armalou never leaves. Now that's intriguing. To come and go, her court must pass through a series of airlocks and undergo a misting spray that removes any potential contaminants. This odd but careful behavior, coupled with a variety of strange treatments and procedures, has allowed Armalou to live for 253 years so far. Okay, so that is really interesting. So you can probably see why I'm digging the queen and I'm digging Charmand, and already I have a buttload of questions about the queen and who she is and what she's like and why the hell she does what she does. Very interesting stuff. My pen is going crazy on my paper at this point. Queen Armalu is known for being both shrewd and ruthless, and her kingdom prospers as a result, for she uses these traits to best her enemies and the foes of her people. As long as her subjects are obedient and efficient, they are treated well and with a fair hand. So I'm digging this too. I'm seeing this queen who is very, like they said, shrewd and ruthless and cunning, and is, I think, a businesswoman at heart, and always has an eye for the bottom line. But yet at the same time, as long as people stay in line, she treats them well and is fair. And so I see a woman who's a very good leader. She knows how to lead people. She knows how to earn the love and respect of her subjects by being fair and even-handed and not unnecessarily cruel. And yet at the same time, she is a force to be reckoned with, and she's not someone to fuck with. And her nation is very prosperous and even a little not so well regarded, one could say envied by the other nations, which also is kind of shining a more positive light on Navarine now. I mean, we see in the first paragraph how people use wealthy as a Navarine merchant as a derision, but perhaps Navarine is disliked by other people because it's better ruled than the other countries and it's run better, and so its people are more prosperous and maybe more arrogant, but perhaps rightfully so. Navarine forms the boundary between the north and the rest of the Steadfast. Oh, now here we go. Now this is interesting. Thus, the northern portion of the kingdom, south of the Tithe River, holds many forts and war castles that help defend this border from the dangers of the beyond. So right there, now I'm getting really excited, because you remember I was just talking about how one of the things I liked about the beyond was this kind of frontier aspect to it. But we get that here in Navarine, because Navarine is the northernmost country bordering the beyond on that part of the Steadfast. They've got this string of forts protecting their borders from the beyond, specifically the Cloud Crystal Sky Fields. And we also know from other places in the core book that it is in the Cloud Crystal Sky Fields that the Amber Pope is rallying troops for the Crusades against the Gaians to the north of that. So this is quickly turning into a very interesting place. Once the Crusades really get going, Navarine is going to be a very interesting and probably dangerous place to be. We have lots of potential with the beyond being just to the north, with this huge unexplored forest. I'm really digging this. I'm thinking this is a really good place to set our campaign. Now that the Amber Pope has declared war on the mysterious lands to the north of the Cloud Crystal Sky Fields, these fortresses are even more important. Queen Armalu has petitioned the papacy to require the other 8 kingdoms to pay to help maintain the bastions. The other rulers balk at funding Navarine's military, feeling that Armalu is as likely to use it to invade them as she is to defend them from the Gaian invaders, should those infidels even come. So again, here we're seeing the shrewdness of the queen, using this opportunity to try to get more monies to improve her own military, while at the same time presenting it as helping out the other kingdoms of the Steadfast. And also makes me wonder if perhaps there might be some kind of collusion going on between Queen Armalu and the Amber Pope, because these crusades to the north of Navarine sure do seem to be working out well for the people of Navarine. I don't really believe in coincidence, do you? So that's really cool. So just reading that, I'm pretty excited. I'm getting over my reservations of using the Steadfast and Navarine specifically for my campaign. And I'm also remembering that people from Monty Cook Games have said more than once that the map of the Ninth World is largely empty. And even in a place like Navarine, there's tons of room to put new things. And just looking at my map at Navarine right now on page 137 of the core book, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe, 8 of the little square symbols, which is a ruin or a mystery, that are browned out, which means they're fair game. And I see, as I mentioned, 1, 2, 3 of the floating relics, that at least one or more of those in my campaign are going to be monoliths. One of them will likely be the Obsidian Monolith. And I see 1, 2, 3 fortresses or strongholds that are unclaimed, as well as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 towns or villages that are unclaimed. So these are just things that are already on the map that are free for you to play with, in addition to things that you could add to the map. In addition, we have some really interesting places that turn up in some of the stories about the Ninth World and in some of the adventures. We've got Charmand, which I've already mentioned. We've got Shalamas, Badrav, the Amber Monolith. We've got Fasten, which is the little town that is detailed in the core book for you. We have the Golden Sanctum, and we have the town of Harmuth, which is discussed some in the Devil's Spine. So there's a lot to offer in Navarine. We also, on the east, we have a coast to the, let's see, what would it be? The Correr Sea, and the Rhinus Bay is to the east there. We've got the Tithe River to the north. We've got forests, we've got farms, we've got plains, we've got some hills. No real mountains, but you do oh my gosh, all this time I've been saying east and I meant west. Sorry, the Westwood is in the west, the sea is in the west, so if you were already typing your email calling me an idiot that I don't know east from west, you can stop now, because I just realized what I was doing. But to the east, we have the Black Riage, which is a huge mountain range. We've got some smaller little ranges to the north in the Cloud Crystal Skyfields. So you've got lots of terrain to play with. You've got some interesting politics going on within the country of Navarine, and also between Navarine and the other nations. So lots of things to play with here. So as I said, I was really digging the Westwood and Charmand. So let's talk a little bit more about Charmand. We're told more about Charmand further on. Long colonnades, marble statuary, monuments to great deeds, and important myths and legends, painted domes, soaring arched bridges. And I love this. Instead of giving us like 3 pages of description and boring us to tear, we just have these adjectives and these visuals just kind of thrown at us. But it gives you the beginnings of an image of the place, and it's very easy to go from there and create your own Charmand. Charmand is a city of architectural beauty and art. The second largest city in Navarine, Charmand is located on both sides of the Jerebost River, with 6 bridges connecting the north and south sides of the city. So that's pretty cool. Charmand is not walled, but 4 fortresses surround it to deter invaders, for the city is the capital of the kingdom and home of Queen Armalou. Each fortress has one of 4 ancient sonic devices that can create a standing field between them. Anyone who tries to cross the barrier suffers great pain, convulsions, and even death. Now that is super cool. This is a place I like, and I definitely want to go there. The Aeon Priests have determined that the unique devices are running low on power. However, and despite all efforts, no one has figured out a way to recharge them. Thus, the 4 devices are used sparingly. In fact, they've never been activated in the memory of most of the city's current residents, and already I have some ideas for an adventure right there. Charmand is home to 95,000 people. The Queen's Palace, the Empeternal House, stands atop the highest hill in the city. It's also known as the House of 1,000 Slaves, for rumors say that it is exactly the number of slaves the Queen uses in the palace alone. Interesting. So we have slavery going on in Charmand. How will the PCs deal with that? Some more fun things to play with. Nearby is the Asaranti University, one of the greatest schools in all the Steadfast. Okay, I'm digging that. I'm a big fan of universities, and definitely some fun can be had there. Thanks to the university, the city is known for its scholars, philosophers, and artists as much as it is for its marble and slaves. So very cool. I like that this is a very cultured place where learned people gather, and yet they have slaves. So some interesting contrasts here, which again will be fun to play with. I'm really digging this place. One of my favorite, my favorite town or city in the Forgotten Realms was Silvery Moon, and one of the main reasons I liked it so much was it was a place of learning and culture. It was one of the few places in the realms where almost all races were welcome, species were welcome. Charmand is kind of like that, but not quite so two-dimensional, because we also have the slavery thing going on. We have the politics among the nation of Navarine and with its neighbors in the Steadfast. So a lot of interesting things to play with here. And then also I mentioned that I really like the Westwood. And so let's talk about the Westwood. Vast, lush, and green, the Westwood is a verdant forest dominating Navarine's coastline. In the west, not the east. I got my compass out and figured it out. It's known for the ancient redwoods that stretch taller than any trees in the Steadfast. Super cool. I'm loving that. Okay, we can skip that. Talking about a particularly huge tree that's awesome, that could be an interesting thing to do with an adventure. For long years, people feared the Westwood, calling it impenetrable and dangerous. Rumors commonly spoke of ghosts and ravenous beasts dwelling within. The Westwood and its hungry spirits were part of the folklore all along the coast. Now that's something interesting and something to remember as I'm developing this area, that people are going to tend to have these superstitions about spirits within the Westwood. But today, the people of Navarine have claimed the forest for their own, determined to carve out safe roads to the coast and land for farms and towns. For their efforts, they have stirred an enemy, not the ghost or tree spirits of legend, but the Kalovas. These creatures claim the majority of the Westwood for themselves and attempt to defend it against encroachment. In the eastern edge of the Westwood, you can find many mills that supply lumber to Navarine and the surrounding lands. Lumber is a major export for the country and is part of the kingdom's wealth. The wood, particularly the redwood, is highly prized. A noble family, the Emals, owns and operates a huge mobile machine that cuts down and processes trees at the same rate as 100 loggers. Called the dark smoker for the greasy muck it belches into the air while it works, the machine is a jury-rigged mess, requiring a staff of mechanics to continually service and repair it to keep it operational. Repeated attacks by the Kalovas damage the rickety device frequently, but technicians and nanos always manage to fix it. The current head of the family, Charina Emol, has placed a 10-shin bounty on the head of any Kalova brought to her. Near the Westwood, you can also find a number of paper mills, particularly around the city of Harmouth. And again, if you want to learn more about Harmouth, there is more details on that town or city in the Devil's Spine. So right there in the Westwood, we have some really interesting things going on. We've got this conflict between the humans and the Kalovas, which I'm very interested in, and I think we can do some fun things with that, some very Numenera type things. We have this machine that one of these powerful noble families is using to do logging into the Westwood. We also have this kind of disconnect between the people of Navarine, who, it's said that the people today of Navarine considered the Westwood theirs and they're not afraid of it anymore, although I'll bet that the villagers are that live nearby, and they believe they've conquered it, and yet they really haven't. The Kalovas are still a problem. They still haven't managed to build any roads through it. They're just logging around the edges. So that's interesting too, and also something that will be fun to play with. All right, so at this point, I've picked a location that I like. I've decided at this point that I am going to at least start the adventure somewhere in Navarine. I'm digging the Westwood, so maybe I will start near there, or at least have the PCs go there. I also am really digging Charmand, so perhaps I will start there, or at least have the PCs go there. So I hope that this has been not only illuminating as far as how I'm creating this particular campaign, but helpful to you as you see how I'm kind of going through things, and I'm taking note of the things that I think are interesting or exciting, or things that I start having ideas about. Like you notice there as I was reading that I called out a few things that just reading it, I'm like, I'm getting some ideas already of things I can do with this. So that would be my advice to you for finding a good location is go through the book, look through the locations, and jot down these ideas you have, or jot down the things that give you the ideas. And then when you're done, look over your list and see which place did you have the most or the coolest ideas for, and start your game there. And as far as those other places, those could be interesting places for you to visit in the future, especially if you're having a campaign that involves the PCs traveling from place to place. You might already have your list of places right there, just based on the places that really intrigued you or that gave you ideas for adventures. And all of this is without even looking at the specific chapter that they, or not chapter, but the specific little section that they have about, that's basically adventure seeds for Navarine. So you can also look at those for some ideas. So I thought one last thing to wrap up this episode, before I get to the actual wrap up, is I told you how I started coming up with some ideas for Charmand and how law and order is handled in Charmand, because I had some PCs doing some criminal things and I wanted to know for myself how that would be dealt with. So this could all be invalidated pretty soon by the World Guide when it comes out, but it may not be, or even if it is, you can still use these ideas for perhaps another city. So this is some of what I came up with for Law and Order in Charmand. I thought I would share it with you. So first of all, the peace is kept in Charmand by a few different military or policing forces. First, we have the Queen's Guard, and by the way, this is first draft, so I don't have cool names for things. They're very generic, very tropic, cliche, unoriginal names for things, so please forgive that. I will definitely be coming up in later revisions of this. I will come up with better things to call things, but right now they're just kind of, a duck is called a duck kind of thing. I didn't get super creative with the names of things. I'm more just trying to get the concepts down so I can know how to deal with things in Charmand, as far as if PCs do illegal things or something like that. So we start out, we have the Queen's Guard. Armalou's Guard is an elite fighting force. They are tasked with patrolling and defending the Empeternal House. They also protect the Queen when she leaves the palace, something that hasn't happened in living memory. The most elite among them serve as the Queen's bodyguard and are nearby at all times. New recruits are usually promoted up from the highest ranks of the City Guard. So next we have the City Guard. Again, very generic. They definitely need a better name than that. The City Guard of Charmand keeps the peace in the city proper. They patrol the streets 28 hours a day, and there are guard posts located throughout the city, usually near major intersections. Charmand is a city of law and order. Every street has an alarm bell on each block that can be rung by any citizen. They are high enough up to prevent access by children. Ringing a false alarm is a very serious offense in Charmand and is harshly punished. The city guard can respond to an alarm in all locations in the city within 5 to 10 minutes. Due to the lack of a city wall, the city guard has many more members than most cities the size of Charmand would have. In addition to patrolling the city, the guard are also garrisoned in each of the 4 fortresses around the city. Each member rotates between patrolling the city and manning one of the 4 fortresses. In this way, all are familiar with the defenses of the fortresses and with the city itself. This also prevents rivalries forming between the quote-unquote city defenders and the quote-unquote fortress defenders, which used to happen in the past before the system was implemented. And next we have the Navarine Army. Being the capital of Navarine, there is always a large amount of the Navarine Army stationed here. They are garrisoned at the 4 fortresses, and while they're there, they do drills along with the city guard stationed there. Many members of the guard were once in the army. The 2 groups get along well with an air of friendly competition between them. Members of the army also assist in patrolling the city, and it's arranged in such a way that each army member has done this at least once early in her career. In this way, if Charmand is ever besieged, members of the army stationed there know the city well enough to help defend it if needed. Members of the army are never promoted directly to the Queen's Guard. They must first serve in the city guard. There have been a few times in the past when an especially esteemed officer in the army served in the city guard only a short time as a formality before advancing to the Queen's Guard, but this is the exception, not the rule. And now on Crime and Punishment. Queen Armalou is known as being both shrewd and ruthless, and the system of law within Charmand reflects this. A citizen is considered innocent until proven guilty by court and council. The court consists of government officials who have been appointed to their position by the Queen herself. The council is an elected body with members theoretically coming from all walks of life. The court and council are intended to check and balance one another, but in reality, the court has more power. There are no lawyers in Charmand. The accused is expected to offer his own defense. Facts are valued over oratory or legal trickery. However, in cases where the accused is not up to the task, perhaps because they are mentally incompetent or something like that, a friend, family member, or official who is involved in the situation may represent him. In important cases of national or city security, the Court of Charmand does have access to Numenera devices that can ascertain the guilt or innocence of the accused, as well as extract information. These are only used when absolutely necessary, however, because these machines are not completely understood and each use could be their last. Read artifacts. Also, they tend to permanently damage the subject, especially if she resists the treatment. The most stubborn subjects can be killed by the machines, but not before the needed information is obtained. There are a variety of punishments intended to fit the crime. These range from fines to community service, imprisonment, maiming, slavery, and death. As opposed to a list of crimes and punishments, punishments are decided more on a case-by-case basis. Precedence is kept in mind, but does not entirely limit the punishments that can be meted out. Queen Armalou can, of course, give royal pardons, but this happens very rarely. So that is a bit of what I've come up with for the city of Charmand as far as how it is defended and how it is protected from within and without and how its laws are enforced.
Coming up next on the Obsidian Monolith.
Now that I know where the story begins, next episode I will begin working on the first adventure in the campaign. Well, that's going to wrap up Game Master's Journey. If you would like to reach me, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. Please go find me on Google+. You can just search for Lex Starwalker. And please join the Game Master's Journey Google+ community. You can find a link to it on our website at starwalkerstudios.com in the Game Master's Journey show notes. And please follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker. Please call the voicemail 626-LEX-GMI1. And again, please visit our website, starwalkerstudios.com. There you can find the show notes for this show. You can find helpful links to our Google+ community, and you can also find our other podcasts that we put out. So once again, I thank you for joining me on my journey as a game master, and I look forward to coming back next week. So until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.